Mech pilots, online. BattleTech manuals, online. Long-term memory, offline. All systems bungled. Initiating BungleTech podcast.
In our 33rd deployment of BungleTech, my spheroid co-host Michael and I creatively reset after our last episode and leverage AI to help us understand the BattleTech universe better. In our primary topic segment, we provide an introductory lesson on teaching a new player Classic BattleTech. Then, in our battlefield outcome report, we reflect on how Commando super explodes. In our rule check discovery segment, we discuss what inspired this episode, rule mistakes stemming from artificial intelligence. And in our Stories of the Inner Sphere segment, we share a story about the iconic encounter between Jamie Wolf and Takashi Kurita. Stand at attention and really pay attention, MechWarriors. It is time to finally learn how to actually play this game.
Bonus objective. Extraordinary proclamation. Initiating.
This is Nathaniel Smithson reporting from the front. The mech hangars are alive with movement, MechWarriors suiting up, technicians scrambling, and the scent of freshly welded armor thick in the air. All forces are deploying to KSEG 6 December 4th through 7th in Burnsville, Minnesota. Tournaments, campaigns, painting, and more. It is indeed a sight. Civilians and veterans alike are rolling out. This is a full spectrum engagement. Badges are now active with the full mission schedule being broadcast openly. You'll find Professor Michael and myself on the front lines of this valiant war effort, organized by WolfNet Radio and MN BattleTech. KSEG 6 is looking to be the biggest conflict I have ever had the honor to report on. We'll see you on the battlefield. This has been Nathaniel Smithson, Iron and Boots on the ground, always first on the scene.
That's right, MechWarriors, you heard it here first. Join Michael and I at KSEG 6, December 4th through 7th. See you on the battlefield.
The conflict on Galatea continues to escalate as gang violence has intensified and skirmishes have broken out between mercenary units in the city and surrounding areas. Even in these violent times, however, there are tales of grit and heroism. Galatea City continues to be a hot spot for conflict as gangs and mercenary units have set up protection rackets and extortion rings throughout the districts. One local business reported on the arrival of Black Sparrow units who've become a bit of a media sensation for their unusual recruiting tactics, exemplary operational successes, and restrained use of munitions in civilian areas. Tabloid coverage of a single Black Sparrow mech cutting down a full lance of urban mechs has added to their reputation, and declassified after-action reports demonstrate their proficiency in close-quarters combat. Boots-on-the-ground reporters captured these striking images of a Barghest heavy quad cut nearly in two and abandoned in the street. And here, a couple blocks away, a king crab caught in close-quarters crossfire and torn open by an internal explosion. Its cockpit crushed in the ensuing fall. In lighter news, one viewer sent us this trio of a knocked-out night sky medium mech. Based on the laser burns and cracked armor, you'd think that this one was done for, but just a moment later, when you see its lance coming down the street, it pops back up like nothing happened. I guess this one was just playing dead. That's all for now, and these are tales of heroism in the sphere.
Primary objective. Podcast topic segment. Initiating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 33 of BungleTech, a BattleTech podcast. Today I am once again privileged to be joined by my honorable, velvety-sounding co-host, Michael. Hello, Michael.
Velvety like a nice soup.
Ooh, the most delicious soup I can imagine.
Every time I think I can match your energy, I am quickly overwhelmed and forced to retreat.
Well, that's why we make a good team. Someone always has to okay, fine.
All right. I've yes-anded you, okay?
Yeah, exactly. So maybe Michael shouldn't have yes-anded me for the last episode because he really went on board with this trailer idea, this crossover idea. And we've noticed that the reaction from the community was, well, quite lukewarm. Lots of the ideas really didn't resonate with people. And let's be honest, Michael, that was quite an emotional blow for both of us.
Yeah, I thought we were doing a great job, but apparently we have bad ideas.
So we decided we're not capable of generating ideas. And you know what? Guys, there's so many mistakes that we make in BungleTech. We just keep on making mistakes, and it's infinite cycle. So Michael and I really did some sort of soul searching, and we decided that we need to just restart BungleTech. And we need to really lean on an expert system out there that can really help us make sure that we're producing quality content that resonates with people and that is correct. We really want to lean in on accuracy.
Yeah, we need modern technologies that are much smarter than we are.
Exactly, much smarter. Just much, much, much smarter. So we decided from going forward, we're going to make all our episodes completely with AI content. So we're going to use AI to generate all our, rule mistake discovery segments, all our topics, everything. And we thought the best place to start was, if we're starting over from the very beginning, how to introduce a new player to a game, to imagine a scenario in which you're at a table and you've an experienced player and you're explaining the game, how to play BattleTech to someone else. It's that's something very relatable. And so that's what we've done today. We've used AI to basically teach us how to play Classic BattleTech, and we've sort of created a scenario that is realistic, something we've actually experienced on the table in terms of the questions that are being asked as we're trying to learn the game. And we're going to walk through this. And so I would, and I believe Michael would as well, encourage that if you have someone who's new to BattleTech, just don't let them listen to any of our previous episodes. 32 episodes previously, just trash them.
Those were full of mistakes.
Yeah, those too many mistakes. So just send them straight here and get them to listen to this episode, because this will give them the fundamentals they need when they come play the game with you at the table.
And let them know that they can always talk to their LLM friend to, help clarify any questions or conundrums they may come across. Because, we certainly found it extremely helpful to explain all sorts of really, clearly major misunderstandings we had about how this game operates.
Yeah. Honestly, this was an eye-opener for me personally, because I joke a lot about how many mistakes I make when I play Classic BattleTech, but this really, 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 I was doing almost everything wrong. And so,
yeah.
And Michael too. And Michael's always been the smart one, so I always leaned on him to trust him to check the rule books, but it turns out he's illiterate. So, it's been...
That's what these machines are for. They do the reading for us, so we don't have to.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's the theme of this episode, and we really hope you like the vision and are inspired and learn a lot from the experience. So, Michael, are you good to start?
Absolutely.
Okay, so in this scenario, I'm playing the newbie player and Michael's playing the expert, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
I've been consulting with our LLM guidance to make sure I have an excellent understanding of the rules. And yeah, Nathan isn't quite up to date yet on all these updated rules. So I'll help guide him through, as though he were a baby bird learning to play BattleTech for the first time.
I'm really excited to be regurgitated the information. I think it's going to be a great way that's chewed down and consumed. Yeah. Okay, well, you know what? I'm excited. So let's say I'm a new player. So, Michael, we're about to play a game. What is Classic BattleTech?
Well, my friend, Classic BattleTech is a game where you control big robot warriors called Mechs that fight each other. You and your friend will each pick a team of robot machines and move them around a map, trying to destroy the other player's robots. It's like a board game where you use cool giant robots instead of chess pieces, and you get to choose what weapons and armor your robots have before the battle starts.
Cool. I love like cyborg robot warrior stuff. So this is really in my like wheelhouse. So I want to play. What do I need to play the game?
Well, you just need a few common items, not too unlike a lot of war games that you might play. You're going to need a set of miniatures to represent the big robot warriors called Mechs. You're going to need a hex grid to move them along. You're going to need some dice, usually 6-sided. You'll need some terrain, and you'll need either a ruler or one of the official BattleTech hex measuring tools.
Okay, that seems pretty easy to go into. I know BattleTech has a lot of big robot warriors. So what big robot warrior should I bring to the table if I'm a new player and I really want to learn?
Well, the problem with the big robot warriors is that the larger ones are, by their nature of being so big and robot, more challenging to pilot. So what I actually recommend, and I have been recommended as the best possible new player mech, is the Locust LCT-1V. You know, this is a fantastic starter mech because it's really fast, it's really agile, it's extremely lightweight. So it's good for learning your movement mechanics, and it's armed with small lasers and a machine gun. And, you know, if it were destroyed, then it's not too expensive to replace.
Okay, cool. I like the concept. I know weight classes play. I've heard they play a battle, something like important in BattleTech. So I'm excited to see how the lightweight comes into gameplay. And honestly, I love playing stuff that's fast and agile. So this is exciting to me. So okay, I'm gonna take the Locust robot warrior. What kind of scenario should I play first to best learn the game, do you think?
Well, I was able to source us an excellent scenario for learning the basic mechanics of the game. It is dubbed First Contact Scenario. And it's a scenario designed for 2 players, one of them a beginner, one of them a more experienced player. That's me. So you as a beginner player, you're going to get your beloved Locust LCT-1V, as well as a second light mech, the Commando Com-2D. I, as the experienced player, will get a medium mech, the Wolverine WVR-6R. We'll be playing across a mixed battlefield with some light hills, some light forests, and some open areas, and on a moderately sized 6x6 hex map. That's 6 hexes by 6 hexes for a total of about 36 hexes. And your objective in this mission is to destroy or force the repeat of the opponent's mech.
That's cool. I'm just visualizing the map right now. I sort of like it's sort of exciting, the concept of the tight little map. Like normally when I see war games, they're these huge expansive things, but being on a 6x6 hex grid, it just feels more like chess to me. So I'm excited this is cool. This is really cool.
Yeah, you could play it in the back of a car, driving along with your parents, you and your siblings sitting next to each other with a tiny magnetized 6x6 grid. You know, that's really what BattleTech was designed for as a game, to be, you know, really tight, confined spaces. This is considered a moderate sized map. You don't even want to see the size of a small map.
Like I imagine the small, it has to be like 4x4 probably, and then a large maybe is it like a 12x12. Wow, that really changes everything. It's exciting. It's exciting. So
they're very intense matches, as I'm sure you'll see.
So I hear these games are pretty like narrative focused. What scenario are we like? What's the narrative lore behind the scenario? Is there one that we'd recommend?
Well, as you know, I'm not really an expert on the lore, so I had to get some assistance with writing this up. So here's the description that was provided alongside the scenario. So this is set on Hematagi, a contested world in the periphery border region between the Federated Suns and the Capellan Confederation. A local Federated Suns planetary militia Wolverine pilot, that's me, is conducting a critical reconnaissance mission to gather intelligence on an incoming mercenary lance suspected of working for House Lau's Capellan Confederation. That's you. These rookie mercenaries, probably a low-tier unit like the Crater's Cobras or the Grey Death Legion, has been contracted by House Lau to disrupt Federated Suns' intelligence gathering operations and prevent critical battlefield information from being transmitted. Does that help get you into the scenario?
It totally does. And I love how it just emphasizes like low tier units. It's cool. Like,
yeah, it gets you down into the mud. Just any one of us could be part of a little group like the Crater Cobras or the Grey Death Legion.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I like starting. It lowers the stakes when I know that I'm a rookie and I'm starting with something insignificant like the Crater Cobras or the Grey Death Legion.
Yeah.
And even that name, the Grey Death Legion, I love how cheesy it is. Like, you can tell that's a low tier, unimportant, the lore faction. Anyhow, okay, so very cool. So what do I need to know about the robot warrior mechs that I'm playing with? Or on the table even, because I need to know some stuff about yours too, I guess.
All right, so let me give you a quick rundown of all of the mechs that you're going to be seeing on the table today. So as a more experienced pilot, I'm going to be driving the Wolverine WVR-6R. It's a medium mech, somewhat well protected for its size and armed with a PPC for long-range engagements, 2 medium lasers for fighting at the mid-range, and an SRM-6 short-range missile for that close-range punch. This is a really versatile mech with a good balance of firepower and protection. And while it does have, both a good balance of firepower and protection, it's got some challenges with its heat management. It's not going to be as fast as any of your mechs, and it's going to be vulnerable to concentrated fire. On your side, you're going to have a Locust LCT-1V light mech. It is extremely light at 20 tons, and it can run at a blistering 9 hexes, or walk at 6 hexes. For its weaponry, it's just got 2 medium lasers, so it's extremely mobile, a small target, and it doesn't generate very much heat, but it is going to be easily damaged if I do manage to hit you. You're also going to have a Commando Com-2D light mech, which is a bit heavier at 25 tons, still extremely fast at 8 hexes running speed, and it's armed with a medium laser and a short-range missile 2, SRM-2. It's a little bit more robust than the Locust is, but it's still got good mobility, even though it's going to be vulnerable to the bigger mechs on its own.
Okay, cool. And so, sorry, how fast was the Wolverine?
Oh, it's pretty fast at 4 hexes of walking speed and 6 hexes of running.
Oh, wow. Okay, wow. The Locust is super fast, eh? Because 9 hexes, that means it can clear the entire 6x6 map. Wow, it's gonna be zipping around. That's crazy.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm excited to learn more. So, how do we set up? So we have the 6x6, the moderate 6x6 hex map. How do we set it up?
Now you'll want to, take some of your terrain pieces that you collected. You'll distribute some hills which are elevated, some light forest hexes to break line of sight, and then make sure you have enough open space that the mechs are still able to maneuver around. And then once you have your battlefield set up, you're going to put the Wolverine down first because this is the reconnaissance mech. It is patrolling the area, and you'll put the 2 light mechs afterwards to represent an ambush scenario. So you'll probably want to put the Wolverine in the middle of the map, and then the 2 light mechs on opposite sides in either forest or hill hexes. Then you're going to want to get your tracking sheets ready, which is where we're going to write down your heat, your armor damage, your movement points. You'll want to gather your fistful of die 6s and have your hex measuring tool ready for calculating precise movement.
Cool. Okay, so I have my notebook here, and I'm writing down different sections for heat, armor damage, and movement points. I wrote down the information you said. I couldn't find a hex measuring tool for BattleTech specifically, so I just got a ruler, but I think it said you could use a ruler instead of the official BattleTech measuring tool, right?
Yes, that's just fine.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we're set up. I got my mechs. I understand sort of the type of mechs they are, or sorry, the robot warriors. I don't know what we should call them. I'll just call them mechs. The mechs. So how do we actually play the game? Like, how does the game function now that everything's set up?
Well, overall, the game progresses through a series of phases where we each take turns doing different steps of the overall battle. So the first phase that we're going to go through is initiative, where we're going to roll 2 die 6s, and whoever rolls higher wins initiative. And of course, ties go to the most experienced pilot or highest ranking pilot. After that, we have the movement phase, where we take turns moving our mechs in initiative order. You plan out your movement, declare what you're doing, and then move your mech across the battlefield. Then we're going to have the weapon attack phase, where we declare all of our attacks, roll them with our 2 hit numbers, and then figure out any damage that our mechs take. After that is the physical attack phase, where we do any close combat punches, kicks, charges, and that happens after all of the weapons attacks are complete. And finally, we have the heat phase, where you check for heat buildup and resolve any heat-related effects you might have.
Okay, easy peasy. So let's do initiative then. Let's break down the initiative phase for me.
Well, we're each going to roll 2 die 6s, and whoever rolls the highest is going to win initiative. And that person who wins initiative gets to choose whether they're going to move first or second. So, for example, if you were to roll a 7 and I were to roll a 7, that would be a tie. And so, as the more experienced player, I would win initiative.
Okay.
It's important to remember that we always roll both dice simultaneously. You should use colored dice to avoid any confusion, and announce your roll total clearly to the whole table. Once you've done that, then I, as the winner in this case, will get to choose whether I'm going to move and attack first or move and attack second. And, eventually you'll get into some more strategic decision making you can do based on your mech's strength and position, what kind of position you want in the initiative order.
Okay. So, one thing I really like is how you're supposed to announce your roll total clearly. That's called out in the rules, because I hate when people mumble at the table. It's just, and it just makes things so much less clear.
Yes, it's very important. And if you are ever in a hall of people playing BattleTech, you will just hear this constant cacophony of people loudly announcing their initiative totals one after the other.
Okay, that's sort of cool. Yeah, that's sort of that way it actually makes it easy to actually find the people, right, too? Like, you can actually pretty easily find the people in the environment. If you go into an environment, you hear that, oh, hey, those are the BattleTech people, the people yelling their initiative numbers. Okay, that's cool.
Yep.
Okay, so let's roll. Okay, so we rolled. Our initiative is done. Now we're into the movement phase. How do we play the movement phase?
All right, so the movement phase is where a lot of the most tactical and strategic decision making goes into. It is extremely important to pay attention during this phase. Overall, we're going to take turns moving according to our initiative order that we just determined. You'll want to make sure that you have your hex measuring tool or ruler handy to determine what are legal moves. And you get to choose between 3 different types of movement, although only 2 of them are relevant in this scenario. So for each of your mechs, you may decide to walk, which consumes 1 movement point per hex that you travel through, or you may choose to run, which consumes 2 movement points per hex that you travel through. Jumping is another 3rd type of movement that is possible, but none of the mechs here are capable of jumping.
Okay. So that's why you said what you did before. So now I'm getting it. So when we run, we technically move less hexes. Okay. So there must be some sort of mechanical...
You have more movement points when you're running. So consider your locust. It has 6 points of movement for walking and 9 points of movement for running. So if you were walking at 1 movement point per hex, you would be able to travel 6 hexes. If you were running, you have 9 movement points, which allows for you to rapidly reposition. And you're going to be expending those movement points at 2 movement points per hex, meaning you can travel 4 hexes when running. It's that type of high mobility that allows the locust to quickly reposition or flank other mechs.
There has to be some sort of mechanical benefit. So I guess, that would be my next question. So, because we're moving technically less hexes when we're running, even though we're running. So I imagine we're sort of like deking or something like that. So So really then, what are the mechanical benefits of running?
Well, generally, you're going to want to run when you're trying to reposition tactically. You are correct that it does reduce the total movement distance, and you do have penalties that make it harder for you to hit targets. And it also generates extra heat. And so all of that combined, the loss of tactical mobility, running is even less attractive than I had originally described to you. In most cases, walking will let you move further and make it easier to shoot your target and also generate less heat. But you might still choose to run, maybe if it let you get behind the Wolverine quickly, or break line of sight so that you didn't come under attack, or to set up a coordinated attack with your other mech, the Commando. But just in general, running is really a last resort movement type. The penalty is pretty significant, and most of the time, walking is the tactically superior option.
Okay, I think that makes sense. So then I imagine that block line of sight is a mechanic, and so is coordinated attacks that specifically have to do with running. But we can get to that when we get to that. It's not important right now, but I'm following. Okay, so I want to do the movement, but our map has forest and hill terrain. Does this impact movement when I am either walking or running?
Yeah, so the different terrain types basically increase the cost of moving through them. So for instance, forested terrain costs 2 movement points per hex when you're walking, and that of course compounds with the running costs. So for instance, on your locust, which has 6 movement points, it can walk about 3 hexes through a forest. If you're running, you would only be able to travel 1 or 2 hexes through the forest. Similarly for the hill, so it costs you 2 movement points to enter an elevated hex, and an additional 1 movement point if you are climbing uphill onto that elevated hex. So for instance, the Wolverine would be able to walk 2 MP onto a hill plus 1 MP climbing uphill for a total of 3 movement points, leaving only 1 movement point for further movement, and it would no longer be able to travel along that hill.
Okay. I think that so now I understand the 6x6 map too, because it's actually the movement's pretty restricted. Like it's very much like, like the horse, in chess, where that is a dramatic move, even though it's a pretty subtle movement on the board.
Yes, the ability to use jump jets is roughly equivalent to what a knight would have in chess.
Ah, okay. Well, thinking about this, so I sort of like how it's harder to move when you're on elevation, regardless if you're going up or down, because it's sort of scary when you're up high, and I sort of like you have to be more careful. So it makes sense that you would expend more movement points because you don't want to fall. So that sort of makes sense to me.
Yes. And just imagine how terrifying it would be to be walking up a tall hill that is also forested.
Yeah.
Certain mechs would not even be able to make that ascent in a heavily wooded area.
There must be lots of like fortresses that are surrounded by trees in the BattleTech universe. Like it must be like really cool defensive. It's giving me this medieval vibe. It's sort of really cool. Okay, well, so we've moved our guys now. So they're in position, but now we go into the weapon attack phase.
Excuse me. They're not your guys.
Sorry.
These are your giant
robot warriors. I'm sorry. Okay,
yes.
Or mechs. I've moved my giant robot warriors. Sorry, I apologize. Terminology can be hard for me. So now we're in the weapon attack phase. Can you break it down? How do we resolve the weapon attack phase?
Well, it's a pretty simple attack sequence overall. Basically, for each of your mechs, you're going to declare your target. You're going to verify that you have line of sight to that mech. You're going to calculate what we call a 2-hit number, which is essentially a measure of how hard it is to hit your target. You'll roll to see whether you manage to hit. And if you do, then you're going to determine your damage location and mark off the damage dealt. So most of that is pretty self-explanatory. Where the real core of the combat system is that determining that 2-hit number. You're going to start with a base 2-hit number of 4 on 2d6. You'll then apply different modifiers for your range to the target, whether the attacker is walking or running, whether the target is walking or running, any terrain effects, and pilot skills, obviously. So, for instance, range modifiers, if you're at short range, which is 1 to 4 hexes away, you take a -2 bonus on your 2 hit. If you're at medium range, which depends on the weapon, it applies no modifier. And if you're at long range, which is beyond the optimal range of your weapon, you add a +2. For movement, if you as the attacker are walking or standing still, you apply no penalties. But if you're running, you add a +2 penalty to hit. For the target, if your target is standing still, you apply no penalty. If they're walking, you add a +1 to hit, and if they've run, they add a +2 to hit. So this is key because it is a tactical advantage why you may choose to run despite the other somewhat debilitating penalties that you face.
Well, I guess that's why you want to run. So even though it makes sense, you're deking. It's like, so even though you're moving less, your mech, you're visualizing your mech is like being quicker, like football drills, running back and forth, running side and forth, and so it's harder to hit. So now I understand why you would sacrifice your hex positioning to get a better defensive modifier. That's cool.
Yes. And it may also allow you to unleash a devastating attack, as you'll see later. There's also some terrain modifiers which may affect your attack. So if your target is standing in clear terrain, there are no penalties. But if they are standing in forest hex or hills or partial cover, you add a +1 penalty to your attack. And also, if you, as the attacker, are standing in a forest, you also add a +1. Then you must take into account the elevation differences. So if you are on higher ground than your target, you get a -1 bonus to your attack. Whereas if you're on lower ground firing up, you add a +1 penalty to your attack, which represents having to crane your mech's neck up to be able to aim at them effectively. It's just an uncomfortable position to be in.
Okay, cool. So like, let me think about this. So then if I decide, like what I did with the last round, I ran my locust on the hill. So because I have a better elevation, it means I'm harder to hit. And because I'm also in a forest hex, there's a hill there. So I'm +4 to hit for him on the base roll of +4, not considering range. And then I get a -1 to hit him. So there's a huge advantage like to being on the hills. And I understand like it's harder to move on hills because it's higher, it's scarier, but you get that you can get some really cool advantages by being one on a hill. It's harder to hit you on a hill, and you have higher ground, makes you easier to shoot people. So that makes sense to me. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. It's all about the trade-offs between movement and positioning and where that gives you bonuses on your attacks.
Cool.
And I recommend there's an acronym that BattleTech players are fond of here that I recommend familiarizing yourself with, although many of these factors won't make a lot of sense right now, and that is GATOR, which stands for Ghost Target, Acceleration, Deceleration, Turning, Orientation, and Reverse. There are also a few other modifiers which may affect your attack.
Okay.
If you are targeting someone in their rear arc, which means directly behind them, it gives you a -2 bonus to your attack. And if you're hitting them in the side, you get a -1 bonus to your attack. So you generally want to set up coordinated attacks flanking your targets so that you can get those attack bonuses against them.
Okay, cool. Cool, that makes sense.
And as I said, you always remember your base attack starts from 4. And then finally, you may apply pilot skill modifiers to the attack, which are determined by your piloting skill / gunnery skill, usually represented at a fraction like 4/5. That first number is your piloting skill, and the second number is your gunnery skill.
Okay.
And these can range all the way from an 8/8 pilot, who has a +3 on all of their 2-hit rolls because they are extremely poor. A 5/5 pilot is a regular, no modifier pilot, all the way up to a 2/2 elite pilot who receives a -3 bonus on all of their 2-hit rolls. So as the more experienced player, my Militia Wolverine is probably a 4/4 or a 3/3, giving me a -2 or a -1 bonus. Whereas you're probably a rookie, probably a 5/5 or a 6/6, giving you either no penalty or a mild +1 penalty.
Okay, wait a minute, but why do I, as a new player, get rookie units and you, as the experienced player, get an experienced unit?
Well, that's one of the elements of balance for this scenario. It's normal for new players to be given more numerous but less capable units, whereas the experienced players get fewer but more powerful units to sort of represent a similar, a realistic scenario of a veteran pilot facing a bunch of incapable rookie opponents. This is like a real world scenario where you have a small number of experienced soldiers against a large number of poorly trained units. And it just creates dramatic tension in this scenario.
Okay, so I think that makes sense. I've always heard about how people have been playing like classic BattleTech for a really long time. And now I understand there's like this inherent incentive built in because the longer you've played, the better units you get on the table and the more advantage you get towards initiative. So you really want to keep playing decade over decade because you literally become better. You literally there's a mechanical benefit from you playing this game for a long time. That's really interesting. I'm sure that makes people really loyal to the game and the franchise.
Absolutely. Although it has made it difficult to recruit rookie players such as yourself, but just stick with it and I'm sure you will be an experienced or elite pilot before you know it.
But at least I get multiple units. I get more to play. Yeah, it seems okay. I don't know.
There's always more locusts that you can throw on the battlefield.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I like having that movement. It's sort of cool. Okay, so we know what we're gonna attack. We selected our weapons and everything like that. We did our calculations right there. So how do we actually calculate damage now that we know our roles?
Well, it's pretty simple. Each of these weapons does a flat amount of damage. For instance, the PPC is 10 damage, a medium laser is 5 damage, an SRM-6 is 6 damage, which is 2 damage per missile. So all that you need to do is roll 2d6 and consult this hit location chart, which indicates which subsection of the mech has been hit by any given attack. Then you'll subtract damage from the armor in that location. Once the armor is depleted, then you will deal damage to the internal structure. And anytime you deal damage to the internal structure, you roll for a possible critical hit.
Okay. So what's the hit location look like? The hit location table you're talking about.
Well, I can read it out for you if you'd like. For a 2 or 3, you hit the head. On a 4, you hit the right arm. 5 or 6, right torso. 7 or 8, the center torso. 9 or 10, the left torso. An 11 is the left arm, and a 12 is the left leg.
Wow, it's super easy to hit the torsos. That's crazy. But wait, where's the right leg? How do I hit the right leg?
That hit location table just doesn't have separate entries for the left leg versus the right leg. It's just got one entry for leg for simplicity. So when you roll a 12 and you hit the location that says leg, you then need to determine which of the two legs gets hit, either by flipping a coin or rolling high-low on a die 6.
Okay, that makes sense. So you hit a leg on 12, and then you roll a d6 or flip a coin to determine left or right. Okay, that's simple.
Yes.
Cool. So
for this reason, legs are generally lightly armored because they are almost impossible to hit, unlike the head, which is a fairly frequent target.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense to me. Okay, so on the topic of we have our weapons, we have the rolls. Now damage, we know the damage values, but how much armor and internal structure? Like I have my notepad here, but I know I'm supposed to write down how much damage I've taken, but I don't know exactly how much damage I can take. So how exactly do I document that?
Well, you're going to want to consult a detailed technical readout for the mech that you've chosen because the armor and internal structure values are specific to each mech type and variant, and you'll want to write those down in your notes. For example, the Wolverine here, it has 3 points of armor on its head, 36 points of armor on its center torso, and 3 internal structure on its head. So if you pass me your sheet, then I can fill out all of the values for the different locations for you.
Okay. So while you do that, and I appreciate that, just this popped into my head, but what happens when I destroy a section? Like, let's say I destroy a section with the PPC. For example, you have the head. The head has 3 armor, you said, and 3 internal structure. The PPC does 10 damage. If we hit a head on a 2 or 3, what happens to the remaining damage? Because that means there is 4 damage left. What happens to excess damage, essentially?
For that, you'll need to consult the excess damage mechanics. So once your damage exceeds your armor, which is your first layer of protection, your internal structure, which is the second layer of protection, once it exceeds both of those, then you have a few additional effects that happen. So firstly, you strip all armor points from the section, then you damage the internal structure, and if the damage has exceeded that internal structure, then you'll make critical hit checks, possibly destroying components, and you may in fact cause mech-wide system failure. And so when a section is destroyed, that damage spills over into the adjacent sections, transferring the damage at the full value and prioritizing the critical internal locations, where the center torso is the most critical location. So just to summarize, excess damage from one section transfers to the adjacent section, reduces the mech's overall structural integrity, and it might cascade into total destruction.
Cool. Well, so it turns out that there has been a critical hit. I rolled there and we go into the internal. So you said there's a critical hit when we get to internal structure. So lucky me, haha. How do we resolve the critical hit?
Luckily, critical hits are very easy to resolve. You just roll 2d6 and you consult against this simple critical hit table. 2, 3, 11, and 12 are weapon destroyed. 4, 5, and 10 are weapon damaged. 6 through 9 mean no critical effect occurred. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's pretty clear, but I don't know how to. How do we know like which thing gets critical hit? Because there's multiple weapons that could get critical hit.
Well, you'll have to consult the weapon list to see which weapons are in each location that is being hit and where you've scored the critical hit. And if there are multiple weapons in the same location, you'll usually go in order of the weapon mounting. So the first weapon listed is going to be the first weapon to be affected. So as an example, the Wolverine only has different weapons in different locations. In the right torso, it has its right arm missile launcher. In the left torso, it has its SRM-6 missile launcher. In the center torso, it has its PPC. And in its sidearms, it has medium lasers.
Oh, that's interesting. So in this example, I critical hit your left arm, right? So that means, and we rolled, it's a weapon damaged. So it's the medium lasers, and it impacts both your medium lasers because they're in the side arms, which represents the arms. Okay, so they can link weapons, so multiple can be critical hit and impact at the same time. That's interesting. So we've damaged the medium lasers in your was it called Robot Warrior? I'm just forgetting the term.
Yes, your giant robot warrior.
In your giant robot warrior side arms, we ended up hitting the medium lasers. They're damaged. So what happens to the damaged medium lasers?
Well, that'll reduce the weapon's accuracy. The delicate focusing lenses in the laser have been damaged. So it's going to increase your 2-hit difficulty, and subsequent attacks with this weapon will add a +1 2-hit modifier.
Okay, cool. So as another side, I should ask this at the beginning, but how do I even destroy a mech? Because I know that's my objective, to destroy you. How do I even destroy you?
Basically by damaging the internal structure and destroying critical components. Each mech section, as we said, has internal structure points. And, as the armor is depleted, the damage goes through the internal structure. And there are certain critical locations to destroy, which will destroy the mech. So if the center torso, the head, or the engine locations are destroyed, the mech itself will be destroyed. Specifically if the center torso is destroyed, the mech is automatically destroyed. If the head is destroyed, the pilot is killed. If you lose both of your side torsos, the mech is destroyed. And if your engine is completely damaged, your mech is destroyed.
Okay, so there's 4 destruction conditions. 3 of them are really obvious to me, but how do I destroy, how do I even hit the engine?
Well, so the engine has its own critical hit rules, and essentially the engine is located in the center torso. You cannot target the engine, but damage to the center torso can potentially affect the engine. And so you'll need to make specific rolls on the critical hit table, some of which can damage engine components, assuming you manage to penetrate the center torso armor first. And once you do manage to deal damage, partial engine damage is going to slow the mech down and reduce its movement points. Severe engine damage will immobilize it. And then if you manage to completely destroy the engine, the mech will be destroyed.
I think that makes sense. I guess it doesn't really matter to us right now because I once again I critically hit your sidearms, not your center torso. So good. That's pretty easy actually. That's pretty easy. So that's the weapon attack phase. We've done it. So but now the physical attack phase. I'm really excited about this. So what type of attacks do I have and how can I do them?
Well, there are 4 types of physical attack available to you. There's the Venerable Punch, there is Kick, there is Death from Above, or DFA, and there is Charging. And essentially all of the attacks will work in a similar way, where after the weapon attack phase, in the physical attack phase, if you're in an adjacent hex to your target, then you can make an attack. And they'll have different to-hit numbers for each different attack type, and notably, physical combat can be pretty risky for both the attacker and defender. So just a word of caution as a new player.
Okay, so what are the common physical attack modifiers, or can you break down the different attacks that I can do so I can decide what to do? Because my Commando, if you remember, I ran it beside your Wolverine here, so I was doing that hoping that I could maybe do a physical attack of some sort.
Well, you can punch if you want because your arms are functional, and generally punches are easier to hit. They don't do as much damage, but you can target specific mech locations to hit with your punch.
Okay.
Alternately, you could kick, since you still have functional legs, which is more difficult to hit, has more potential to deal damage, and is especially good against lighter mechs. Finally, there is the possibility of a charge attack, where you can move directly into the target's hex. It's an automatic dealing of collision damage, and it causes damage to both mechs based on the attacker's weight and running movement points. And then once you deal it, the target is going to take full damage, and the attacker will take half of the damage. So this is a very risky maneuver, and you need to have used running movement to be able to declare it.
Okay. Well, based on what I understood, I just ran, so this sounds like the perfect opportunity to use this. So how do I want to do a charge? Can you break it down a little bit more for me? Just explain exactly what the outcome will be if I decide to charge, what I need to roll.
Well, like I said, you don't need to roll anything. Charges automatically deal the damage. So in your case, your 25-ton Commando, moving at its running speed with 4 MP, would deal 25 times 4 or 100 damage. So that would cause the Wolverine to take 100 damage and the Commando to take 50 damage.
Okay. Well, I want to do that.
That is a risky but valiant tactical decision, and my Wolverine is actually going to charge your Commando as well. So in the case that we are both charging each other, then we both move into each other's hexes, we calculate the damage simultaneously, and we each take damage based on the weight and movement of our opponent. So as I said, your Commando, 25 tons, 4 movement points, is 100 damage dealt to the Wolverine, and my Wolverine at 55 tons, running at 4 MP, will deal 55 times 4 or 220 damage to your Commando. And then both mechs will end up in the same hex. Potentially there will be pilot damage, but I don't think it's going to be relevant given the amounts of damage we're dealing with here. So just important to remember, this is a bit of a desperation move. So are you certain that you wish to undertake this charge attack?
I mean, I think so, because my objective is to defeat your Wolverine, and if I still have 2 mechs on the field and I'm only losing 1, so I think that I think I can sacrifice this pilot. I think it makes sense. And looking at your notepad with your armor and internal, and comparing to my notepad, there's nothing on our notepad. Any location that gets hit is just going to go straight through, and because of how you explain destruction works, it's just going to go, I think it's going to guarantee destroy each mech.
Well, you are allowed to make whatever tactical decisions you wish on the battlefield, but do remember in the future that generally light mechs should avoid charging heavier mechs.
Okay, I don't necessarily understand why, but maybe next game we'll get into that. Okay, so I mean, both our mechs are destroyed then, I guess. So what happens when a mech is destroyed?
Well, in these cases, both mechs have been destroyed. However, the Commando has taken even more damage and is experiencing total mech destruction, where its internal structure is completely destroyed. This typically results in a dramatic explosion called an internal catastrophic failure. And so both mechs are effectively eliminated, and there is also a massive explosion. This explosion is going to affect anything in an adjacent hex and potentially deals explosion damage if they're nearby.
Oh, so potentially my locust could get hit if it's close enough. But it's not in an adjacent hex, so I guess it's not damaged, but what would it be if it was in an adjacent hex? What would the explosion damage be to the locust?
Well, the exploding mech would take damage equal to the ammo shots that are remaining in it, times the damage per shot, and this damage transfers inward according to the normal rules. The area effect is that mechs in adjacent hexes take 1/10 of that explosion damage applied as a single hit to a randomly rolled location, and then they must make a piloting skill roll to avoid falling. So in this case, it would be about 8 damage dealt to the locust.
Okay. Well, I sort of feel like you've been a little bit easy on me on this introduction game because I think that now we're done all the weapon attacks. Both these mechs have been destroyed. My locust is standing, but I guess we still have the heat phase. Maybe this could turn things around. Can you explain how I determine heat, how we manage this phase?
It's quite straightforward. There's a few things that can generate heat for you: firing your weapons, running, or different environmental conditions. So let's take your locust, for example, which fired its 2 medium lasers. Those are 3 heat each, generating a total weapon heat of 6. It was also running, which generates 1 additional heat for a total of 7 heat. Light mechs typically have limited heat sinks. The locust, for instance, has 3 heat sinks and can dissipate 3 heat per turn. So at 7 heat generated and 3 heat dissipated, that leaves you with 5 heat accumulated. And we can consult this table here of the effects of heat on your mechs. So if you have 0 to 2 heat, there is no effect. If there is 3 to 4 heat, there are no penalties. If there's 5 heat, there are no penalties. 6 to 7 heat, you take a -1 on all your weapon attacks. 8 to 9 heat, you take a -2 on all your weapon attacks. On 10 or 11, your movement is reduced and you take -2 on weapon attacks. Once you're all the way up to 12 or 13 heat, you're at risk of shutting down. And at 14 plus heat, your mech automatically shuts down to protect its systems.
Okay, so I think I should be okay, but well, it says here, so when heat is either 3 to 4 or 5, there are no penalties. From my perspective, that means there must be some other effects. Are there some other effects, or what happens exactly if it's between 3 to 4 or if it's between 5? Just because they were sort of called out as different categories there.
There are no positive effects for having your heat between 3 and 5. Your heat's just neutral, and that represents normal mech operation. However, an astute tactical observer may note that between 6 and 9 heat, you are taking minuses on all of your weapons attacks. So that is actually where the positive effects of heat kick in.
Oh, I see. So you want to run hot, but you don't want to run too hot, because if you run too hot, you could shut down. And like the different thresholds, maybe certain weapons do different heat. So it's just a way to like sort of benchmark or aim yourself, or maybe a visual tool to help you sort of optimize it. That's sort of cool. I guess I'll get into that in future games. This is a lot for my first game. So that's good to know though. Okay, so I think we've gone through all the phases. My locust ended, I think, at 5 heat. The locust has survived. The Wolverine and Commando have been destroyed, and I functionally completed my objective. So yeah, what happens now?
You are correct. For this scenario, the locust is now the only surviving mech, which makes this technically a victory for the locust pilot. Congratulations.
Sweet. I thought I was going to lose because you're the experienced pilot and had all those advantages, but man, those charge moves are really crazy. I guess the beginner's luck, right? Okay, this was fun, and this was actually pretty quick. So when I come do this again, or I'm going to take this back to some of my other friends that they've been interested in learning to play. So I think I'm going to teach them what you taught me. So do you have any tips that you'd recommend for remembering all these rules, or just anything that I can really digest this most effectively.
Well, I have a few helpful mnemonics for you to remember all these rules that we discussed, because I know BattleTech can be a pretty complicated game to keep track of. So when you're in the movement phase, you'll want to remember the common mnemonic, walk softly, run rarely. That's because walking is 1 movement per hex and running is 2 movements per hex, and running also makes you easier to hit. There's also the hit location mnemonic, which is center hits, arms might, legs last. Because most hits on a 7 or 8 go to your center torso, whereas the arms and side torsos are still common but less likely. Head and legs are rarely hit. For keeping your heat under control on the battlefield, you'll want to remember cool is the rule, hot is not. Because between 0 and 2 heat, you have no worries. 3 to 5 heat, steady on. 6+ heat, things get sketchy. When you're calculating your 2 hit rolls, remember 4 is core, modifiers soar. Because your base 2 hit number is 4, then you add or subtract modifiers, and higher is harder to hit. And lastly, I have the damage progression mnemonic, which tells you armor first, structure worst, which is so that you can remember that you destroy the armor before the internal structure. And always remember that the center torso is key to mech survival. I'd also like to leave you with one more acronym to help you develop as a better pilot. That acronym is, of course, PILOT, which stands for P, prioritize movement, I, identify critical targets, L, limit heat generation, O, optimize weapon ranges, and T, tactical positioning.
Wow. Okay. These are helpful, especially forest core, modifiers soar, and armor first, structure worst. Those really resonate with me. Cool.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many young players have difficulty remembering whether their mechs explode from the outside in or the inside out.
Well, clearly the developers have thought about this and created all these helpful things to make this game really easy to learn. So honestly, Michael, this has been really fun. Thank you for teaching me how to play Classic BattleTech the right way. I'm super excited to teach my friends. Honestly, I really like to know that if I keep on investing this and once, because I know there's people out there that are like 60 been playing this for like 40 years. And I'm really excited to know that eventually, if I keep on playing and they die, then I'll be the experienced player and I can get those advantages at the table. I think that'll be really exciting. Or maybe not, metaphorically die or whatever, just leave the table. I know that over time, and especially new players, if I get in now, that means when I'm teaching my friends, that means I'm the experienced player, right? So that means I get the initiative bonus and I get the cooler mech.
You are correct. And also remember to never crack open a rule book or read any actual details on this, because that's kind of slow. You always have access to an AI to help you learn the game, just like this.
Yes, great. Well, it makes sense. So thank you for your time. I'll be seeing you on the battlefield, good sir.
I'll be seeing you on the moderately sized 6x6 battlefield.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In, powered by Series AI. The planet Trell 1 in the Rimworld's Republic maintains one of the sphere's most unusual defensive installations, the Singing Caves. These natural limestone caverns run for over 200 kilometers beneath the planetary capital and produce haunting harmonic tones when the wind passes through them. During the Amaris Civil War, Republican forces discovered that by placing industrial fans at strategic points, they could generate infrasonic frequencies that cause severe disorientation in attacking forces. Starleague records indicate that at least one battalion of jump infantry became completely combat ineffective after prolonged exposure to the 7 Hz resonance, reporting symptoms including vertigo, panic, and temporary blindness. Now you know about the sphere we live in, powered by Series AI.
Tertiary objective, Battlefield Outcome Report segment. Initiating.
Good evening. We're bringing you a shocking report from volatile Tematagi planetary border region. In a stunning turn of events, a routine reconnaissance mission has ended in total destruction. Sources confirm a catastrophic engagement between Federated Suns and Capellan Confederation forces that reads like something out of a combat sim. Two mechs, a Wolverine and a Commando, literally charge each other to mutual destruction in what experts are calling a textbook example of terminal combat.
This is unprecedented, Nate. What can only be described as a nuclear-level mech confrontation.
We'll be right back after these messages with more on this developing story. This has been Nathaniel Smithson with INN Boots on the Ground. Always first on the scene. So, what happened? Two mechs charged attacked each other, completely destroying one another. Well, how did it happen? In Classic BattleTech, if mechs have used running MP, they are able to charge into adjacent hexes during the physical attack phase. A Commando and a Wolverine that had both used running MP decided to do just this. Once declared, there are no rolls, and the collision is immediate, and the damage is determined by tonnage multiplied by running MP. This resulted in the Commando receiving 220 damage. The Commando super explodes. The Wolverine receives 100 damage and is destroyed. The final outcome, mutual destruction, both mechs eliminated, essentially a tactical draw.
This is Professor Michael presenting The Sphere We Live In, powered by Series AI. Domesticated kodamas display remarkable emotional intelligence, seeming to sense their owner's mood with uncanny accuracy. When their human is sad, kodamas will bring small offerings, a favorite stylus, a shiny button, or even one of their most prized possessions, a perfectly round pebble they've been carrying for months. They'll curl all 6 legs around their distressed owners in what xenobiologists call a full-body hug, purring at a frequency proven to lower human blood pressure. Now you know about the sphere we live in, powered by Series AI.
Secondary objective, rule check discovery segment. Initiating.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Rule Check Discovery segment. Well, oh boy, this has been an episode of some massive, insane rule interpretations and lore misinterpretations, and oh my goodness, hasn't it, Michael?
Everything we've said today is absolutely correct, and I stand behind it. That's called bravery, Nathan.
Okay. Well, the inspiration for this episode was actually came from some AI-based rule mistakes that today we are going to discuss. So far, I mean, this hasn't happened that often, but there's been 2 instances in which we've had interacted with players that have been using AI to try to learn the game, and it's created some really, really crazy stuff. And so at my own table, a long time ago, we had someone new to the game, and because they wanted to be prepped, they went on to ChatGPT and they asked it to explain the core elements of the BattleTech classic role-playing game of how to play it mechanically. And can't get into the specific example because it was so vague and so weird and so long ago. But essentially, the answer it gave was it combined the initiative system of Harebrained Schemes BattleTech with the classic BattleTech system to create really weird outcomes where somehow you were rolling still, but then based on your weight class after the initiative rolls, there was a different turn order based in. So basically just completely different game.
And this is something that like I've had trouble with. You know, Harebrained Schemes BattleTech is like a great game. I love it, but its existence has made it harder has made it harder to find answers to questions I might have, because I keep getting pulled to answers about, an entirely different game set in the same universe, but with just enough similarities that it messes up the search engines. So, some poor large language model has no chance at properly distinguishing those, nor some beginner player.
Totally. And so when the person came to the table, they were explaining how it was working and everything like that. And it took a while to clear it up, to be honest, because the one thing about AI, it's really good at sounding right. It is the most confident, incompetent player at the table. And they throw references, they do all this stuff, and it takes a lot of time to validate and sort of cross-reference and make sure what is actually accurate. And because, our podcast is founded on the concept of making mistakes, we know that you make mistakes. So you always got to be open when you're playing Classic BattleTech, especially when you're playing all the TAC Ops stuff, especially when you're playing across years in which you have errata coming in completely changing stuff, that things fundamentally change. So you got to be open to go back and check those rule books.
Yeah. And something like initiative, that's pretty obvious. It feels like if someone brought to you some weird initiative rule, you'd be like, that's not how initiative works. You recognize it. But in the other example today, it's not nearly that obvious.
Totally.
To most of us.
And so what re-brought this to my mind and made us decide to make this episode was actually a conversation we had with one of our venerable listeners, the Zot. And he brought it to our Discord, this concept of the confusion regarding battle armor. And essentially it was regarding elementals. So if you've ever seen an elemental record sheet, each elemental in the formation has 10 armor pips and 1 internal structure. The 1 internal structure representing the dude inside who's like, I'm mushy, I can take 1 damage. And the 10 representing the suit. Through ChatGPT and different AI tools, this listener was told that the record sheet displays 10 pips simply to visually match mech conventions, but in reality, each pip is 1/3 of a point, just rounded up for visual clarity. So really what that meant is that when you look at a record sheet that has battle armor or infantry or anything like that, those are actually 1/3 of the number of what you're seeing. So the elemental would actually have 1 internal and 3 armor rather than 1 and 10, which makes them much worse because
it makes them
terrifyingly worse. Because if you have the 10 and the 1, what can you take? You can take AC-10, you can take a PPC. These are pretty common weapons on the battlefield. If you have a 3 and 1, you can't even take a medium laser. A single medium laser kills an elemental. And one of the strengths of battle armors is that they're good at taking more damage than you expect they're going to take, because every time you attack the formation, you're rolling for a random guy, right? So it's like you hit soldier 1 out of 5, and then next time soldier 3 out of 5. So they actually take quite a lot of damage before they lose their combat effectiveness. And so he shared this rule mistake with us, and we started doing research.
But he didn't know it was a mistake. He was just looking for clarification, right?
Well, he thought that we had been doing it wrong. He thought that truly that each pip was actually 1/3 of a point. Like the clarity was there. So like, just like how we had the Omega bungle regarding ammo explosions and damage resolution that like 99% of the world has been making, this would be another equivalent. If this was a mistake, everybody was making this mistake. So the first thing we do is we dive in. And so me and quite a few other people dove into the rule books. Like off the top of my head, we had Chandler from On the Origins. We had JP from our local group. We had me. We're like, whoa, what is this? This is crazy. And the reality is, like, when you look at the answer from this AI bot, it was actually referencing page numbers of the books. So we're flipping open the page numbers. We're looking at stuff. And it was specific enough that you would read the page and you'd think to yourself, man, maybe I don't have an up-to-date errata. Maybe my version just slightly updated and they changed one sentence that modifies this all. And it took so long to figure this out. And eventually the reality that we figured out was that at the time when this conversation started, we didn't know it was sourced from AI. And then after, when we got the supplementary information, which was presenting the evidence, I could tell by how the evidence was presented, because AI presents itself in a specific way, that I'm like, oh, this was written by AI. This is a hallucination. Like, it's making this stuff up, despite it dropping the references, despite it being so clear, so confident, so well researched. It was just randomly making something up. And oh boy, when we were doing the first segment today and we're explaining, like, there was hundreds of rule mistakes in what the AI model was teaching us. And the AI model that we used, to be fair to the AI model, we were asking it genuine questions, but we weren't necessarily using the smartest model. And we were, in a way, trying to lead to crazy answers without being deceptive, without like saying, give us a wrong answer. Like, we were trying to get right answers, but we were asking stuff in a way that we thought could lead it astray a little bit. And it delivered. And not only did it deliver, then it started, following its own logic. So as soon as you set it one inch off path, every other question's another inch. It just gets crazier and crazier and crazier, right? But even before using that, because Michael and I, when we were trying to generate the content, I used good AI models. And I asked questions that were really succinct to get very focused information that I didn't think it would get wrong. And it was still getting some very, very basic stuff wrong all the way throughout. So, long story short, really be mindful when you're using AI to validate the BattleTech rules, or when you're using it to learn the game in particular, because it is so good at sounding right. And you can't tell that's the big challenge. You can't tell when it hallucinates or not, right? There's no way to double check that it's hallucinating other than bringing out the books yourself, checking references, and cross-referencing stuff. And literally, it was cross-referencing 3 different books. Like, this was not an easy thing to dig into. Like, there's a reason 3 of us were looking at it like, what the heck? How, this is a huge misconception. If this is the case, we got to get to the bottom of this. And to be honest, when I was looking at it, I didn't think that was actually the way it was, but I thought maybe the rule books were written in a way that actually a deep interpretation did mean that, and just people hadn't noticed. But no, upon further inspection, it was crazy.
And I expect that we'll keep seeing more of this, people talking to large language models, asking them to help clarify things and understand things. That's going to become more and more popular. And, like you say, it's something that we just need to be sort of mindful of. It's a whole new class of mistake, a whole new source of bungles that, frankly, I think we were unprepared for. Because, if someone says something that doesn't make sense, then, it doesn't make sense. But if someone says something that kind of makes sense and is carefully researched and well referenced, you're just sort of your human nature just makes you want to believe it. It sounds right. You're like, wow, that person sounds smart. They must know what they're talking about. They sound smarter than my friend who half remembers the rules from years ago. They're clear and articulate, and they call out the page numbers for every one of these rules. I think I'm going to trust that over my friend who maybe remembers reading it in a rule book, half a decade ago.
And the interesting thing about these models too is when I was diving into this rule, I sort of started to understand the logic, because the AI was deducing things. And I could understand, okay, it made this decision because of this or this. Essentially, we know that the classic rule books are not clear. We know that there's lots of inconsistencies in them because they've been built over years and years and years. And so you're giving this essentially artifact that the AI is supposed to learn from that has so many holes, and then it tries to fill them in, and crazy stuff like this happens. I imagine the AI is only as good as the knowledge that we can put into it, and then other limitations of the AI. And in this case, with BattleTech, Classic BattleTech in particular, using books like Total Warfare, Tech Manual, Tac Ops, all this stuff, optional rules, everything mixes in a way that is very inherently confusing and requires this sort of, I don't even know how the outlook is, but you have to step back.
It's like arcane lore, you see that sometimes, and discussions about weird edged rules, and they're like, back in 1994, this is how it worked, but it changed with Total Warfare, and Pac Ops added a secondary rule. And, there's some people who have that like deep knowledge of all the different intricacies and the history and stuff. So, I would believe it.
So anyhow, this has been fun. So those are 2 rule mistakes. So one, combining turn order, which basically just completely changed the game, but mainly this battle armor one, thinking that the record sheet was somehow this abstraction and visual representation, but actually meant something else. No, it's not. Every pip means an armor pip. It's not a third or anything like that, but very relatable how these mistakes come about. And, I'd love to know about more AI mistakes that have come about from people's perceptions. And also,
let us know if any of your friends or players have ever, brought something extremely weird that ended up being some regurgitated large language model output.
Totally. And you can see this at the table too, right? Like, okay, I need to answer this question about this obscure thing in BattleTech. You're at the table, you don't want to flip through rule books. ChatGPT, how does weight class impact physical attacks in BattleTech? And then it looks online, it is going to mix up,
if you're lucky,
classic or tac ops. It's going to figure something out. And I bet you 5 times out of 10, or I guess that would be 50%, 1 out of 2, it's going to be wrong. Yeah. But sometimes it'll be right.
This is math to a large language model.
Hey, I don't do math. Okay, I just
exactly.
I just look up into the sky and I say, "Give me the numbers I need," and then I roll the dice, and then I equate based on that. Yeah, that's as deep as I go, my friend. Okay, well, I think that is that, and we're gonna wrap up today's episode with narrative retelling of a classic and iconic scene in BattleTech that we got AI to rewrite, and I have narrated it in our Stories of the Inner Sphere segment. Be stoked. It is extremely amazing. Prepare yourself for a variety of calculated insults. So calculated.
Tertiary objective, Stories of the Inner Sphere segment. Initiating.
Chapter 12, The Weight of Steel. The corridors of Unity City's diplomatic quarter hummed with suppressed energy on the eve of the wedding. Servants scurried past with last-minute preparations, their footsteps muffled by thick carpeting that had witnessed centuries of political theater. Jamie Wolf moved against the current of activity, his purposeful stride parting the crowd like a ship's prow through water. Every step was measured, every gesture planned. The package he carried, 2 silk-wrapped swords, had been prepared with meticulous care for maximum impact. 2 members of the Wolf's Dragoons fell into step behind him, without being asked. Captain Natasha Kerensky, the Black Widow herself, matched his pace on his left. On his right, Major Kelly Yukhanov walked with the easy grace of a man ready for violence at a moment's notice. "You sure about this, Colonel?" Natasha asked, her voice low. "The coordinator's not known for his sense of humor." "Every detail has been considered," Wolf replied, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. "The timing, the setting, the witnesses who will undoubtedly report back to their masters. Even your presence here, Natasha, is calculated. The Black Widow at my shoulder sends a message." She smiled darkly. "Always playing chess while everyone else plays checkers." "The coordinator understands only strength and fear," Wolf said. "Tonight, he learns that the Dragoons can deliver both with surgical precision." The anteroom to the Kurita delegation's quarters carried the subtle scent of sandalwood incense, a small rebellion against terror's recycled air. 2 DCMS guards in dress uniforms stood at attention outside the carved wooden doors, an affectation that must have cost a fortune to transport from Luthien. They straightened as Wolf approached, hands moving to sidearms. Wolf had timed his arrival perfectly. late enough that Takashi would have begun his evening meditation, early enough that interrupting it would seem deliberate rather than coincidental. The first calculated insult of many. "Colonel Wolf to see the coordinator," Wolf announced, not slowing his pace.
"The coordinator is not receiving,"
one guard began. "He'll receive me." Wolf's tone was precisely modulated, not quite threatening, but carrying an undercurrent of inevitable violence. "Tell him I bring a matter of honor." The guards exchanged glances. Wolf had chosen his words with care. Matter of honor carried weight in the Draconis Combine that transcended normal protocol. To refuse such a meeting would suggest cowardice. The second calculated insult, forcing Takashi to either see him or appear afraid. One guard activated his comm unit, speaking rapidly in Japanese. After a moment, he nodded and stepped aside.
"The coordinator will see you,"
he said, then looked pointedly at Natasha and Yukionov.
"Alone."
Wolf handed his sidearm to Natasha with deliberate ceremony, a gesture that appeared respectful, but actually highlighted that he considered himself dangerous enough without weapons. The third calculated insult. "Wait here," he told his officers, loud enough for the Kurita guards to hear. "This won't take long." The doors parted with a whisper of well-oiled hinges. Inside, Takashi Kurita sat in a seiza position on a raised platform, his eyes closed in meditation. The room had been transformed into a piece of Luthian transported across the stars. Tatami mats, shoji screens, a simple scroll bearing calligraphy hanging in the Tokonoma alcove. Wolf had expected this, had counted on it. The coordinator's need to surround himself with the trappings of his heritage, even here, especially here, revealed a weakness Wolf could exploit. Wolf strode in without ceremony, his military boots striking the tatami mats with deliberate force, each footfall a small desecration of the sacred space. The fourth calculated insult. Behind him, two Kurita guards belatedly rushed in, hands on their weapons, clearly alarmed that someone had entered without being properly announced or searched. "Coordinator," Wolf said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. The lack of honorific was precise, deliberate, not quite disrespectful enough to demand response, but noticeable. "We need to talk." Kashi's eyes opened slowly, taking in the scene with the practiced calm of a lifetime spent navigating deadly politics. His face was a masterwork of controlled expression, neither surprised nor unsurprised, as if mercenary colonels regularly interrupted his meditation. He raised one hand minutely, and his guards reluctantly stepped back, though their hands remained near their sidearms.
"Colonel Wolf."
Takashi's tone was neutral, almost pleasant, but his eyes were hard as obsidian.
"I was not aware we had an appointment. Tomorrow's ceremony has made everyone's schedule complicated."
Wolf had anticipated this response, had prepared for it. "This won't wait for schedules." He moved forward with deliberate steps, each one measured to stop just inside the range that would make Takashi uncomfortable, but not quite close enough to seem immediately threatening. "I've come to return something that belongs to House Kurita, something that should never have left your space." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Takashi's expression remained carved from stone, but Wolf caught the micro-expression, a slight tightening around the eyes. The coordinator knew exactly what those wrapped shapes meant.
"Interesting,"
Takashi murmured.
"And what is it you believe belongs to my house?"
"Your people left something behind on Anting," Wolf said, allowing a pause to stretch just long enough to build tension. "After they finished their wet work, Sloppy of them, really. Not what one expects from the vaunted DCMS. The fifth calculated insult, suggesting incompetence in Takashi's forces. In one fluid motion, Wolf cast the swords onto the polished floor between them. He'd practiced this gesture, ensuring they would land at precisely the right angle, making just enough noise to echo in the space without seeming theatrical. They clattered against the marble with a sound like thunder in the silence that followed. The silk wrapping, deliberately loose, fell away as planned, revealing the paired daisho. The katana and wakizashi bore the mon of House Tetsuhara, their lacquered scabbards gleaming in the soft light, dragons coiling around them in gold leaf. Minobu Tetsuhara's swords, Wolf stated, his voice flat and dangerous. A samurai's soul, as your people say, found them next to his body. Your Yakuza assassins were in too much of a hurry to take them, or perhaps they didn't recognize their value. Criminal scum rarely do. The sixth calculated insult, highlighting that Takashi had used common criminals instead of warriors. Takashi's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For a moment, neither man moved. Wolf counted the seconds in his head, waiting for precisely the right moment to continue.
And how did these come to be in your possession, Colonel?
Takashi finally asked, though they both knew he already knew the answer. You know damn well how. Wolf allowed his composure to crack slightly, a calculated display of emotion that would seem genuine. Your Yakuza assassins were thorough on Anting, 17 dead, all killed with poison or blades to make it look like a rival crime syndicate. They killed a man who chose honor over orders, who saved my life and the lives of my people because it was right, not because it was commanded. Wolf took a step closer, precisely calibrated to make the guards tense without actually reaching for weapons. He'd studied their positions when he entered, knew exactly how far he could push. But here's what interests me, Takashi. Wolf continued, using the coordinator's given name without title, the seventh calculated insult. You didn't even have the courage to order his death officially. No seppuku, no formal execution. You had him murdered in an alley like a common merchant who couldn't pay his debts. Was it cowardice, or did you know that no samurai would carry out such an order against Minobu Tetsuhara?
Minobu Tetsuhara died a traitor's death,
Takashi said, though Wolf heard the slight hesitation, the moment where Takashi had to choose his words. A traitor! Wolf laughed, a sound he'd practiced to carry just the right amount of derision without becoming mockery. He was the only true samurai in your entire realm. He understood something you've forgotten in your pursuit of power, that Bushido means more than blind obedience. When Yorinaga would have destroyed us all on Mallory's world in a way that would have violated every principle of honorable warfare, Minobu chose to warn us. Wolf began to pace, a calculated movement that forced Takashi to either turn his head to follow or lose eye contact. Either choice would be a small victory.
You presume to lecture me on Bushido.
Takashi's voice remained level, but Wolf heard the strain beneath it.
You, a mercenary who sells his sword to the highest bidder.
I sell my services, not my honor. Wolf shot back, timing his response to interrupt just as Takashi finished, the eighth calculated insult, denying him the pause for effect. Can you say the same? You ordered the death of your most loyal samurai because he wouldn't become a butcher for you. You had him killed by Yakuza, criminals, assassins without honor, rather than allow him the dignity of seppuku. What does that say about the state of your Bushido, coordinator? The two men stared at each other across the fallen swords. Wolf had positioned himself so that Takashi would have to look past the abandoned daisho to meet his eyes, a constant reminder of the subject at hand. I'm returning these to you with a message, Takashi Kurita. Wolf continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean in slightly to hear, a psychological trick that created involuntary engagement. Minobu Tetsuharu was the best of what the Draconis Combine claims to represent. He embodied the true spirit of the samurai you all pretend to be, and you had him murdered like a common criminal because you were afraid.
Afraid?
Takashi's composure cracked slightly, exactly as Wolf had calculated it would. Afraid, Wolf confirmed. Afraid that if you gave him an honorable death, others might ask why. Afraid that his example might inspire others to choose conscience over blind obedience. Afraid that a true samurai might show your other warriors what you've all forgotten, that honor exists independent of orders. One of the guards stepped forward, hand on his katana.
You dare!
Wolf turned his gaze to the guard, having anticipated this reaction. Planned for it. I dare because I stand here unarmed in the heart of your power, speaking truths your master doesn't want to hear. Which of us shows more courage, boy? The ninth calculated insult, calling out Takashi's need for armed guards, while Wolf stood defenseless. Turning back to Takashi, Wolf delivered what he'd been building toward. Tomorrow your son marries Melissa Steiner, and the Inner Sphere celebrates peace. Both men knew he meant Hans Davian, not Theodore Kurita. The 10th calculated insult, perhaps the cruelest, suggesting Takashi was so powerless he couldn't even keep his enemies from claiming his metaphorical family. I'll smile and raise toasts like everyone else. I'll play the game, observe the forms, but understand this, Coordinator. Minobu Tetsuhara had more honor in his little finger than flows through the veins of all your Yakuza lapdogs combined. Wolf's hands moved slowly, deliberately to rest on his hip where his sidearm would normally be, a gesture that suggested threat without actually making one, carefully calculated to skirt the edge of provocation. The Wolf's Dragoons remember our debts, he continued. We remember our friends, and we never forget those who murder them. One day, Takashi Kurita, you may find yourself in need of that kind of mercy Minobu showed us. And on that day, remember that you killed the one man in your service who understood what mercy meant. The one man who might have taught you that strength without honor is just brutality with better clothing. The 11th calculated insult, suggesting the Coordinator was nothing more than a well-dressed thug. Wolf turned his back on the Coordinator, the 12th and most egregious calculated insult, showing complete dismissal of any threat Takashi might pose. He'd mapped his exit route, knew exactly how many steps to the door, had timed this so the guards would be paralyzed between acting without orders and letting the insult pass. At the threshold, he paused without turning, delivering his final thrust. Keep your swords, Takashi. Mount them on your wall if you like. Let them remind you of what you once had and threw away. But every time you look at them, remember 3 things. You killed the last truly honorable samurai in your service. You were too cowardly to do it yourself or even order it officially. And Jamie Wolf remembers both these facts. He turned his head slightly, his profile visible in the doorway, a pose he'd calculated to appear both threatening and dismissive. The Dragoons have a saying, we always collect our debts. Sometimes those debts are paid in sea bills, sometimes in blood, and sometimes, Coordinator, they're paid in ways you don't see coming until it's too late. Minobu understood that. It's a pity his lord never did. The 13th calculated insult, suggesting Minobu had been the superior man. The doors hissed shut behind him, leaving Takashi Kurita alone with his guards and the abandoned swords. Wolf had orchestrated every moment, from his arrival during meditation to his final words, each building upon the last, each designed to wound without quite crossing the line that would demand immediate response. Outside, Jamie Wolf rejoined his officers. Natasha handed him his sidearm without a word, but her eyes glinted with appreciation.
13 calculated insults in less than 10 minutes,
she murmured as they walked away.
I counted.
13 that he'll recognize, Wolf corrected. Several more he won't realize until later, when he replays this conversation in his mind. The kind that will keep him awake at night, wondering what else he missed.
Think he'll retaliate?
Wolf glanced back at the closed doors, a cold smile playing at his lips. Not immediately, not here. I've given him insults without giving him adequate pretext for response. He'll have to swallow them, at least for now. And that, Natasha, will burn worse than any of the words themselves. They walked through Terra's corridors toward the Wolf's Dragoon's quarters, passing delegates and servants preparing for tomorrow's grand ceremony. Wolf had accomplished exactly what he'd intended, delivered a message that would be heard throughout the Inner Sphere by morning, established the Dragoons as players who could beard the dragon in his den, and honored Minobu's memory in a way that would ensure he was not forgotten.
You know,
Yukinov said quietly,
Minobu would have hated all this political theater.
Perhaps, Wolf agreed, but he would have understood its necessity. In this game of thrones we're all forced to play, sometimes the most calculated insult is the most honest tribute we can offer to an honorable man. Behind them in that small room, the coordinator of the Draconis Combine knelt before the abandoned swords of his most loyal samurai, understanding with perfect clarity that he had just been comprehensively outmaneuvered by a mercenary who had turned a simple return of property into a public indictment that would echo through the corridors of power for years to come. The wedding would proceed tomorrow. The forced succession war would begin in secret. But in the game of calculated insults and careful provocations, Jamie Wolf had just demonstrated why the Wolf's Dragoons were far more than simple mercenaries. They were players in the great game, and they played to win. This has been a retelling of an iconic BattleTech scene generated by artificial intelligence. The real story can be found in Wolves on the Border by Robert N. Charret. Spoiler alert, it's really different.
No, I can't do this. Listen, yes, I understand, but it's just not working. Yes, I realize... No, I know it's more than... No, I don't care how much it's worth, but you need to... Absolutely not. No, it's degrading. It's embarrassing. I studied at Sarna. Who's ever heard of the Singing Caves? No, you need to listen to... Did you hear the Kodama one? No, did you hear the Kodama one? This is a matter of public safety. No, listen, it's me or that machine. I'm not doing this.
And that brings us to an end of another deployment of BungleTech. Thank you for your diligent listening. A quick reminder, if you haven't had a chance to give us a review on your podcast platform of choice, please do. It is key to our sustainment and continued growth as a podcast. As always, you can find us via Discord, email, Twitter, and Patreon, all linked in the show description. Until next time, MechWarriors, good fortunes on the battlefield. Selah.
All podcast objectives complete. Podcast shutdown sequence initiated.